My son forced me to hand over my beach house to his mother-in-law. I immediately sold the house and left the country. The next day he called me. Where are we supposed to live? My response made him faint. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Nancy, and at 64 years old I thought I had learned to recognize manipulation when I saw it. I was wrong. The beach house in Myrtle Beach had been my sanctuary for 23 years. Every morning, I would sit on the wraparound porch with my coffee, watching the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. The sound of waves had become my lullaby, my meditation, my connection to something larger than the disappointments life had handed me. After my husband Robert died 5 years ago, that house became even more precious. It wasn't just a vacation home anymore. It was where I went to remember who I was before I became someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's caretaker. It was mine, bought with money I had saved working double shifts as a nurse for 37 years. That Tuesday morning in March, Tyler called me with urgency in his voice that immediately set my nerves on edge. Mom, we need to talk. Can Sarah and I come over tonight? My son had always been my weakness. Even at 39, Tyler could make me feel like I was failing him somehow. Maybe it was because he looked so much like his father, or maybe it was the guilt that had been eating at me since his childhood. All those times I had to work late, all those school events I missed, all those moments when exhaustion made me short-tempered. When they arrived, Sarah was carrying little Emma, my 3-year-old granddaughter, while 6-year-old Jake ran straight to me for a hug. Sarah looked tired. Her usually perfect blonde hair pulled back in a messy bun. Dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Mom, Tyler began, settling into the armchair that had been Robert's favorite. We have a situation with Margaret. Margaret, Tyler's mother-in-law, had always been a thorn in my side, but I tolerated her for the sake of family peace. She was one of those women who believed the world owed her something, who expected everyone to cater to her needs without question. Sarah shifted Emma on her lap, her voice barely above a whisper. She's been diagnosed with severe anxiety and depression. The doctors say she needs a calm, peaceful environment to recover. I felt my stomach tighten. I'm sorry to hear that, but what does this have to do with me? Tyler leaned forward, his expression earnest. Mom, you know how much we love you, how much we appreciate everything you've done for us over the years. Here it comes, I thought. The setup. Margaret's therapist says the beach house would be the perfect place for her recovery. The sound of the ocean, the peaceful environment. It could really help her get better. I stared at him, not quite believing where this was heading. Tyler, that's my home. I lived there 6 months out of the year. Sarah started crying then, soft tears that she quickly wiped away. I know it's a huge ask, Nancy, but she's my mother. She raised me alone after my dad left, worked 3 jobs to put me through college. I can't just let her suffer when there might be something we can do to help. The tears looked real. The desperation in her voice sounded genuine. But something in my gut was screaming warnings I chose to ignore. Tyler reached over and took my hand. It would just be temporary, Mom. Maybe 6 months, a year at most. Just until she gets back on her feet. But where would I go during my time there? It's my routine, my peace. You could stay at the apartment in Charleston more. Or come visit us more often. The kids would love that. Tyler's smile was warm, convincing. Mom, you raised me to help family when they're in need. Margaret is family now. That hit me where it hurt. I had raised him with those values, hadn't I? Family first, always help those in need, be generous with what you have. How could I say no without being a hypocrite? Sarah spoke up again, her voice thick with emotion. I wouldn't ask if there was any other option. But we can't afford to rent her a place by the ocean, and the doctors really think the environment could make the difference between her getting better or... She trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Emma chose that moment to reach for me, her little arms stretching out. Grandma Nancy, hug. I took her in my arms, inhaling that sweet child scent, feeling her tiny body relax against mine. How could I be selfish when my granddaughter's other grandmother was suffering? What exactly are you asking me to do? I heard myself say. Tyler's relief was visible. We'd need to transfer the deed to Margaret's name, just temporarily, for insurance purposes, and so she can make any necessary modifications for her health needs. My lawyer says it's the cleanest way to handle it. Every instinct I had was screaming no. The house was my financial security, my retirement plan, my emotional anchor. But looking at Sarah's tear-streaked face, at Tyler's pleading eyes, at little Emma in my arms, I felt my resolve crumbling. I need time to think about this. Of course, Tyler said quickly. But Mom, time is kind of important here. Margaret's condition is getting worse, and the sooner we can get her settled somewhere peaceful. Sarah nodded earnestly. The therapist says every day we delay could make her recovery longer. That night after they left, I sat on my porch until well past midnight, listening to the waves and trying to sort through my feelings. The logical part of my brain was listing all the reasons this was a bad idea. But the mother in me, the part that had always put Tyler's needs before my own, was already planning how to make it work. I called Tyler the next morning. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I'll do it. But I want it in writing that this is temporary, and I want to know exactly what modifications Margaret might need to make. Mom, you're amazing. Sarah cried with relief when I told her you were considering it. We'll handle all the paperwork, make everything as easy as possible for you. 2 weeks later, I sat in a lawyer's office, signing papers that transferred my beloved beach house to Margaret Williams. The lawyer Tyler had recommended was efficient, professional, and seemed to assume I knew exactly what I was doing. Are you sure about this, Mrs. Henderson? He asked as I hesitated over the final signature. Once this is filed, Margaret Williams will be the legal owner of the property. Tyler squeezed my shoulder. It's just temporary, Mom. We'll transfer it back once Margaret is better. I signed my name, each letter feeling like I was signing away a piece of my soul. That evening, I drove to the beach house one last time as its owner. I walked through each room, touching familiar surfaces, memorizing the way the late afternoon light fell across the hardwood floors. In the master bedroom, I opened the window and listened to the ocean, trying to capture the sound in my memory. 3 months later, I would discover that Margaret had put the house on the market the day after the deed was transferred. 3 months later, I would learn that Sarah's tears had been as fake as her concern for her mother's mental health. But that night, standing in my soon-to-be former bedroom, I still believed I was doing the right thing. I still believed that family meant something to my son. I still believed that love and sacrifice would be appreciated and returned. I had never been more wrong in my life. The truth hit me like a physical blow on a sunny Thursday morning in June. I had been living in my small Charleston apartment for 3 months, trying to adjust to a life without my morning ocean views and evening beach walks. The apartment felt cramped after the spaciousness of the beach house, and the city sounds, traffic, sirens, construction, never let me forget what I had given up. Tyler called me every few weeks with updates on Margaret's recovery. She was doing better, the ocean air was helping, but the doctors wanted to see more progress before declaring her well enough to move out. Each call felt like another postponement of my return to the life I loved. That Thursday, I decided to drive to Myrtle Beach. I told myself I just wanted to see the house, maybe catch a glimpse of Margaret, reassure myself that my sacrifice was actually helping someone. The 2-hour drive gave me time to rehearse what I would say if anyone saw me, just a concerned former owner, checking on the property. I parked across the street, far enough away to not seem intrusive but close enough to see the house clearly. What I saw made my blood freeze. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. Not just any for sale sign, but one of those expensive professional realtor signs with Margaret's photo on it. Margaret Williams, it read, Premium Properties Real Estate Agent. I sat in my car staring at that sign, my mind struggling to process what I was seeing. Margaret wasn't just selling my house, she was the realtor selling it. How long had this been planned? How long had they been lying to me? My hands were shaking as I took out my phone and called the number on the sign. A cheerful voice answered on the second ring. Margaret Williams, Premium Properties. How can I help you find your dream home today? I forced my voice to sound casual, interested. Hi. I saw your listing on Ocean View Drive. The beach house? Could you tell me a little about it? Oh, that's a gorgeous property. Margaret's enthusiasm was nauseating. Just came on the market last week. The owner is motivated to sell quickly. She's relocating and needs to liquidate her assets fast. Relocating. Liquidating assets. The clinical terms for destroying my life. How long has the current owner lived there? I managed to ask. Not long at all. She recently inherited it from a family member, but it's not really her style. Too much maintenance for someone her age, you know? She's eager to move on to something more manageable. Inherited it from a family member. I was the family member apparently, and I was dead. The asking price seems reasonable for oceanfront property, I said, though my voice sounded strange and distant to my own ears. Between you and me, Margaret lowered her voice conspiratorially, the owner is very motivated. She might even consider offers below asking price if it means a quick sale. I've got showings lined up all weekend. I ended the call and sat there, staring at the house I had loved for over 2 decades. The house I had worked myself to exhaustion to buy. The house I had given away because I believed in family loyalty and helping those in need. Margaret wasn't sick. Margaret wasn't recovering from anxiety and depression in the peaceful ocean environment. Margaret was a realtor who had convinced her daughter and son-in-law to help her steal a $300,000 property from a trusting old woman. The worst part wasn't even the theft itself. It was the elaborate lie they had constructed around it. Sarah's tears, Tyler's concerned expressions, the fake medical advice about ocean air and peaceful environments. They had studied me, identified my weaknesses, and crafted a story designed to manipulate my maternal instincts and family values. I drove home in a daze, barely remembering the trip back to Charleston. Once in my apartment, I paced the small living room, my mind racing. What could I do? I had willingly signed over the deed. Tyler's lawyer had been careful to make everything legal and binding. I had no legal recourse. I had been manipulated, but not technically defrauded. That evening, Tyler called with his usual update. Hey Mom, just checking in. Margaret is doing so much better. The house is really working its magic on her mental health. I almost laughed at the audacity of it. That's wonderful to hear, Tyler. I'm so glad she's recovering well. Yeah, the doctors are cautiously optimistic. They think maybe by Christmas she might be well enough to consider moving back to her own place. Christmas. They were planning to string me along until Christmas while they sold my house and pocketed the money. Tyler, I said carefully, I was thinking about driving down to visit this weekend. Maybe see how Margaret is doing, spend some time with the grandkids. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. Oh Mom, that's really sweet of you, but Margaret's therapist specifically said no visitors right now. Too stimulating for her recovery process. Even we're only allowed to visit once a month. Another lie smoothly delivered. I wondered how many times they had practiced these conversations, how they divided up the deception between them. Of course, I said. I wouldn't want to interfere with her healing. After we hung up, I sat in my small kitchen, looking out at the parking lot instead of the ocean, and felt something shift inside me. The grief and confusion began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. They thought I was just a foolish old woman, easy to manipulate and dismiss. They thought they could steal my life's work and feed me lies while they counted their profits. They thought I would never find out, or that if I did, I would be too ashamed or too weak to do anything about it. They had forgotten something important about me. I hadn't worked my way through nursing school while raising a child alone by being weak. I hadn't built a life and bought property by being foolish. I hadn't survived Robert's death and rebuilt myself at 60 by being easy to dismiss. I was Nancy Henderson. I had been underestimated before, and I had proven those people wrong every time. As I sat there in my cramped apartment, listening to the traffic outside instead of ocean waves, I began to plan. Not revenge, that was too petty. Justice was too abstract. What I wanted was something simpler and more devastating than either. I wanted them to experience consequences. Real consequences for real actions. The kind of consequences that make you understand that other people aren't toys to be manipulated for your benefit. I picked up my phone and started making calls. First to my bank, then to a realtor I knew from my nursing days, then to an international moving company. If Margaret wanted to sell a house quickly, I was going to help her with that. In fact, I was going to make sure she got exactly what she was asking for, a fast sale to a motivated buyer. The motivated buyer was going to be me, buying it back through a shell company I was about to create. And once I owned it again, I was going to do something that would teach my son and his wife a lesson they would never forget. But first I had some traveling to do. The next 72 hours changed everything. I had spent 3 sleepless nights crafting my plan, researching international property laws, and liquidating assets I never thought I would touch. The small inheritance Robert left me, the bonds I had been saving for emergencies, even my grandmother's jewelry, everything went into funding what I was about to do. Friday morning I called Margaret's real estate office, using a fake name and a voice I made sound 20 years younger. "Hi. I'm calling about the Oceanview Drive property. Is it still available?" Margaret's voice was sickeningly sweet. "Oh yes, it's a beautiful home. Are you looking to schedule a showing?" "Actually, I'm prepared to make a cash offer today. My company relocates executives frequently, and we need properties that can close quickly. What's your best price for a 30-day closing?" I could practically hear the dollar signs in her voice. "Well, the listing price is $299,000, but for a cash offer with a quick closing, I think the owner might consider $275,000. $275,000. She was going to sell my house. The house I had bought for $150,000 and put another $100,000 into renovating, for less than it was worth just to make a quick profit. "I'll take it," I said. "But I need to close within 2 weeks. My executive starts Monday the 22nd. 2 weeks. Margaret sounded breathless with excitement. "Let me call the owner right now. Can I reach you at this number?" "I'll call you back in 2 hours for an answer." I hung up and immediately called my lawyer. Not Tyler's lawyer, but my own attorney, someone I had used for years and trusted completely. "Janet, I need to set up an LLC immediately. And I need you to handle a property purchase that has to be completely confidential." Janet Martinez had been handling legal issues for nurses in our hospital system for decades. She was smart, discreet, and didn't ask unnecessary questions. "Nancy, what are you getting yourself into?" I told her the whole story. When I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Those bastards," she said finally. "Excuse my French, but those absolute bastards. Yes, I can help you. In fact, I'm going to enjoy helping you." 2 hours later I called Margaret back. "The company has approved the purchase at $275,000 cash with a 14-day closing. When can we sign the papers?" "This is wonderful. Can you come in Monday morning? I'll have all the paperwork ready." Monday morning I sat in Margaret's office wearing a wig, sunglasses, and clothes I had borrowed from my neighbor, a younger woman who was happy to help when I explained I was planning a surprise for my family. Margaret didn't recognize me, which wasn't surprising since she had barely spoken to me during the years Tyler and Sarah had been married. I signed the papers as Maria Santos, representative of Santos Holdings LLC. Margaret was practically glowing with greed as she explained how motivated the seller was, how lucky we were to get such a beautiful property at such a good price. "The owner inherited this from an elderly relative who passed away recently," she said, sliding the contracts across her desk. "She just wants to liquidate quickly and move on with her life." I signed each document carefully, thinking about how much I wanted to tell her exactly who that elderly relative was. But patience was part of the plan. By Friday afternoon I owned my house again. By Saturday morning I was on a plane to Lisbon. I had always dreamed of living in Portugal. Robert and I had planned to travel there for our 35th anniversary, before his heart attack changed everything. The coastal town of Cascais had been at the top of our list: beautiful beaches, reasonable cost of living, friendly people who wouldn't ask too many questions about a 64-year-old American woman starting over. I rented a small apartment overlooking the Atlantic, opened a Portuguese bank account, and began the process of applying for residency. The European Union made it surprisingly easy for retirees with sufficient funds to relocate, and I had just come into a significant amount of money from selling a property in South Carolina. It took Tyler 8 days to notice I was gone. I was sitting in a cafe in Cascais, practicing my Portuguese with a patient waiter, when my phone rang with Tyler's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then he called again. And again. On the 4th call I answered. "Mom, where the hell are you? I've been to your apartment 3 times. Mrs. Davidson said you moved out." I took a sip of my coffee, real coffee, rich and dark. Nothing like the watered-down American version I had been drinking for 64 years. "I'm in Portugal, Tyler." Silence. Then, "Portugal? What are you doing in Portugal?" "I'm living here now. I sold the Charleston apartment and moved." "Sold the apartment? Mom, you can't just pick up and move to another country without telling anyone. What if something happens to you? What if we need to reach you?" The irony was breathtaking. This from the man who had been lying to me for months. "You can reach me the same way you just did," I said calmly. "My phone works internationally." "But Mom, this is crazy. You don't speak Portuguese. You don't know anyone there. How are you going to live?" I looked out at the ocean, so different from the view I had lost but beautiful in its own way. "I'm learning Portuguese. I'm meeting people. And I'm living quite well on the money I got from selling my assets." "What assets?" "The apartment wasn't worth that much." Here it was. The moment I had been waiting for. "Oh, not just the apartment, Tyler. I also sold the beach house." The silence stretched so long I thought the call had been dropped. "What do you mean you sold the beach house?" His voice was careful now, controlled. "Exactly what I said. I sold it 2 weeks ago. Cash sale, quick closing. The new owners took possession on Friday." "But Mom." His voice cracked. "Margaret is living there. For her recovery. You can't just sell a house with someone living in it." "I didn't sell a house with someone living in it, Tyler. I sold an empty house that was on the market." Another long silence. I could hear him breathing, could almost see the wheels turning in his head as he tried to figure out how much I knew and how much he could still lie his way out of. "I don't understand," he said finally. "Margaret isn't well enough to move out yet. The doctors said." "Tyler." I interrupted him, my voice still calm but with steel underneath. "Margaret put the house on the market the day after I signed it over to her. She's been showing it to buyers for weeks. She sold it to a cash buyer last Monday for $275,000. The sound he made was somewhere between a gasp and a moan. "I know about the real estate signs. I know she's not sick. I know there was never any depression or anxiety or medical need for ocean air. I know you and Sarah conspired with her to steal my house." "Mom, I can explain." "No, Tyler. You can't. There's no explanation that makes this okay. There's no justification that turns theft into a favor. You stole from me, you lied to me, and you thought I was too old and too stupid to figure it out. It wasn't supposed to happen like this," he said, and for the first time, he sounded like the little boy who used to cry when he broke something. "Margaret was supposed to give you half the money when it sold. It was supposed to be like an investment for you." I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Half the money from stealing my own house was supposed to be a favor to me? "Tyler, do you hear yourself? We needed the money, Mom. Sarah's been out of work. I got passed over for that promotion. The kids need so many things. And you thought stealing from me was easier than getting second jobs or cutting expenses or living within your means. We're family," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Family helps family." "Yes, Tyler. Family does help family. I helped you by giving up my home when you told me someone needed it. But you didn't help me. You used me." I could hear Sarah in the background now asking what was wrong, what was happening. Tyler was trying to explain in whispers, and I could hear the panic in both their voices. "Mom, please," Tyler said, coming back to the phone. "We can fix this. Margaret still has most of the money. We can buy another house somewhere nice, maybe even nicer than the beach house." "With what money, Tyler?" "Margaret spent the money from selling my house. And now the new owners want their property back." "What new owners? Who bought it?" I smiled, looking out at the Portuguese coastline, feeling the warm sun on my face. "I did." The sound Tyler made when I told him I had bought back my own house was something I will never forget. It started as a sharp intake of breath, evolved into a strangled gasp, and ended in complete silence that stretched for nearly 30 seconds. "You... what?" he finally managed to whisper. "I bought the house back, Tyler. Through an LLC. Margaret sold my house to me for $275,000, not knowing it was me buying it." I could hear Sarah in the background, her voice rising in panic as Tyler tried to explain what was happening. Their whispered argument was frantic, desperate, the sound of people realizing their world was collapsing around them. "But that means..." Tyler's voice trailed off as the implications hit him. "That means Margaret has already spent money that belongs to me, since she sold me a house I already owned. That means you're all living in a house you have no legal right to occupy. And that means you have about 24 hours to vacate my property." The silence was broken by Sarah screaming in the background. Not words, just a sound of pure rage and disbelief. I heard something crash, Probably a glass or plate being thrown, followed by muffled sobbing. "Mom, you can't do this to us," Tyler said, his voice breaking. "We have nowhere to go. The kids, Emma and Jake, they think of that as their home now. The way I thought of it as my home for 23 years? That's different. You have money now. You can live anywhere." I closed my eyes, feeling the Portuguese sun on my eyelids, and marveled at the selfishness in that statement. Even now, caught in his lies and facing homelessness, Tyler believed his problems were more important than anyone else's. "I have money because I sold everything I own to buy back what you stole from me. Do you understand that, Tyler? I liquidated my entire retirement, sold jewelry that belonged to my grandmother, cashed in bonds I was saving for emergencies, all to get back what was already mine. But why Portugal? Why move so far away?" The question revealed how little he understood about what he had done to me. In his mind, this was about money and property. He couldn't grasp that it was about trust, about love, about the fundamental relationship between a mother and son. "I moved to Portugal because I realized I have no family left in America." "That's not true. You have us, you have the grandkids." "No, Tyler. I have a son who conspired to rob me, a daughter-in-law who lied to my face with tears in her eyes, and grandchildren whose other grandmother taught them that stealing from elderly people is acceptable if you need the money." I could hear him crying now, soft sounds that might have moved me 6 months ago. But I had cried too, for weeks after signing over my house, every morning when I woke up in that cramped Charleston apartment instead of my airy beach bedroom, every evening when I watched the sun set over a parking lot instead of the Atlantic Ocean. "What do you want from us?" he asked. "What can we do to fix this?" "I want you to pack your belongings and leave my house by tomorrow evening." "We can't do that. We need time to find a place to figure things out." "You had months to figure things out, Tyler. You chose to spend that time lying to me instead." Sarah grabbed the phone then, her voice shrill with panic and anger. "Nancy, you can't throw us out like this. We have children. Little children who don't understand what's happening." "Sarah," I said calmly, "you should have thought about your children before you decided to steal their grandmother's home. You should have considered how this might affect them before you coached them to hug me extra tight while you were planning to rob me. We never meant for it to happen this way." "How exactly did you mean for it to happen? Were you planning to eventually tell me you had sold my house? Or were you going to keep lying indefinitely and hope I never found out?" She didn't answer because there was no good answer. They had never planned to tell me the truth. They had simply assumed I would never discover it, or that if I did, I would be too ashamed or too weak to do anything about it. Tyler took the phone back. "Mom, please. Give us 2 weeks. Just 2 weeks to find somewhere else to live. I gave you my house when you told me someone needed it. I gave up my peace and happiness because I believed family meant something to you. You repaid that gift by stealing from me. Why should I give you anything else? Because we're family." "No, Tyler. We're not." The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. Family doesn't betray each other like this. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and steal. You made your choice when you decided I was worth less to you than the money my house could bring. Don't say that. Please don't say that. But it was too late. The words were out, and they were honest in a way our family had avoided being for years. Maybe decades. "I need you to understand something," I continued, my voice growing stronger as I spoke. "This isn't about punishment. This isn't about revenge. This is about consequences. You made choices and now you have to live with what those choices cost you." "We'll pay you back," Tyler said desperately. "Every penny. Whatever it takes." "With what money?" "Margaret spent the proceeds from selling my house. Sarah hasn't worked in 2 years. You're barely making ends meet even when you're not paying rent. Where exactly is this payback money going to come from?" He didn't have an answer for that either. "Tyler, I'm going to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. If our situations were reversed, if you owned a house and I convinced you to sign it over to me by lying about someone being sick, then sold it without telling you, what would you do?" The silence stretched so long I thought he had hung up. "I don't know," he finally whispered. "Yes, you do. You would be furious. You would feel betrayed and used and discarded. You would want justice. The difference is I'm not asking for justice. I'm not trying to destroy your life or hurt your children. I'm simply taking back what was mine and removing myself from a situation where I clearly can't trust the people I love most. So that's it? You're just going to abandon us? The question was so backwards, so completely wrong that I actually laughed. Tyler, you abandoned me. You abandoned me the moment you decided my trust was worth less than your financial problems. You abandoned me when you chose to solve your money issues by stealing from your mother, instead of working harder, or asking for help honestly. I could hear the children in the background now. Emma asking why mommy was crying, Jake wanting to know what was wrong. The sound of their confused little voices broke my heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. Those children deserve better than parents who think theft is an acceptable solution to financial problems, I said. Maybe losing the house you stole will teach you to find legal ways to support your family. Mom. Tyler, I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have 24 hours to remove your belongings from my house. After that, I will contact the police and have you removed as trespassers. I don't want to do that in front of Emma and Jake, so I suggest you don't make it necessary. Where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem to solve anymore. You're adults. You made adult decisions. Now you get to live with adult consequences. I could hear Sarah screaming again in the background, something about lawyers and tenant rights and illegal eviction. Sarah can call all the lawyers she wants, I said. You have no lease, you paid no rent, and you're occupying property you helped steal from the owner. There are no tenant rights that protect people from being evicted from houses they're living in illegally. Tyler was crying openly now, the kind of raw, desperate sobbing I remembered from his childhood, when he finally realized he couldn't talk his way out of trouble. I'm sorry, he said through the tears. Mom, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but please don't destroy our lives over it. I'm not destroying your lives, Tyler. I'm saving mine. I hung up the phone and sat back in my chair at the Portuguese cafe, looking out at the ocean that was becoming familiar, listening to the sound of voices speaking a language I was slowly learning to understand. For the first time in months, I felt something approaching peace. The next 48 hours brought a storm of phone calls, text messages, and voicemails that I watched pile up on my phone like debris after a hurricane. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat in Portuguese cafes, walked along the Cascais coastline, and learned to conjugate verbs while my former life imploded 6,000 miles away. The first call came from Margaret herself at 3 a.m. Portuguese time, which meant it was 10 at night in South Carolina. I let it ring through to voicemail and listened to the message later while having breakfast. Her voice was shrill, panicked, nothing like the smooth professional tone she had used when selling me my own house. Nancy, this is Margaret. I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but you need to call me immediately. There are serious legal implications to what you've done, and I will not hesitate to pursue every avenue available to protect my interests. Legal implications. I almost choked on my coffee laughing. The woman who had conspired to steal a house was threatening me with legal action for buying it back. The second voicemail came from Sarah, recorded while she was clearly having a complete breakdown. You can't do this to us. You can't just destroy people's lives because you're angry. Emma keeps asking why we have to leave her room, and I don't know what to tell her. How do I explain to a 3-year-old that her grandmother decided to make us homeless? What kind of person are you? What kind of person was I? I was the kind of person who had worked double shifts for 37 years to buy a house, only to have it stolen by people I trusted. I was the kind of person who had been lied to, manipulated, and discarded by her own family. I was the kind of person who had finally learned that being kind and generous doesn't protect you from being used. By the third day, the calls had taken on a different tone. Desperation had replaced anger. Tyler's voice was hoarse, exhausted. Mom, we're staying at the Motel 6 on Highway 17. The kids are scared and confused. Sarah hasn't stopped crying in 2 days. I'm begging you, please reconsider. We'll do whatever you want, pay whatever you ask, sign whatever papers you need. Just please don't make us start over with nothing. Start over with nothing. The irony was staggering. That's exactly what they had planned for me. To take my house, sell it, and leave me to start over with nothing while they profited from my loss. I saved that voicemail and played it whenever I felt my resolve wavering. Janet, my lawyer, called with updates that she delivered with barely concealed glee. Margaret's attorney contacted me this morning. Apparently, She's claiming she never authorized the sale of the property because she was mentally incapacitated due to her medical condition. They want to argue the sale was invalid. What medical condition? I asked. The one she invented to steal my house in the first place? That's exactly what I told them. I also pointed out that Margaret was the listing agent who actively marketed and sold the property, which would be highly unusual behavior for someone who was mentally incapacitated. Her lawyer got very quiet after that. What happens now? Nothing. They have no case. Margaret legally owned the property, she legally sold it, and the sale was completed according to all applicable laws. The fact that she sold it to the original owner through an intermediary doesn't invalidate anything. If anything, it proves you were the rightful owner all along. A week later, my neighbor from Charleston called with news I hadn't expected. Nancy, honey, I thought you should know. There are police cars at your old apartment building. Word is, Tyler got arrested for trying to break into the superintendent's office to get access to your forwarding address. Tyler had tried to burglarize my former building to find me. The son I had raised to respect other people's property had attempted to commit another crime in his desperate attempt to undo the consequences of the first crime. Is he in jail? I asked. No, they let him go with a warning since nothing was actually stolen. But Nancy, honey, he looks terrible. I saw him in the parking lot before the police came, and he's lost weight. Looks like he hasn't slept in days. Sarah was in the car with the kids, and they all looked like they'd been living rough. I felt a stab of pain at the thought of Emma and Jake living in a motel, confused and frightened. But then I remembered Sarah's tears as she begged me to give up my house for her mother's fake illness. I remembered Tyler's practiced lies about temporary arrangements and medical necessity. They had made their choices. They had chosen to solve their problems by destroying mine. 2 weeks after I had reclaimed my house, I got a call from an unexpected source, Margaret's ex-husband, Sarah's father, who had left when Sarah was 15. Mrs. Henderson? This is David Williams. I think we need to talk. I was walking along the beach in Cascais when he called, my daily evening stroll that had replaced my morning coffee ritual at the stolen house. I know who you are, I said carefully. I know what my ex-wife and daughter did to you. I want you to know that not everyone in this family thinks it was acceptable. Why are you calling me? Because Margaret called me yesterday, asking for money to hire a lawyer to fight you. When I asked what she needed a lawyer for, she told me this whole story about how you tricked her into selling a house, and now she's being sued by some investment company. I stopped walking. Investment company? That's what she claimed. Said some LLC was demanding she return money from a property sale because of irregularities in the ownership transfer. She wanted $15,000 to fight it. Of course she had lied to him too. Margaret couldn't tell anyone the truth because the truth made her look like exactly what she was. A thief who had been outsmarted by her victim. What did you tell her? I told her I'd heard a different version of this story from Sarah's cousin, who heard it from someone at the hospital where you used to work. The version where she convinced your son to help her steal your house. There was a pause. I could hear traffic in the background, the sound of American highways that seemed so foreign now. Mrs. Henderson, I left Margaret because she always believed other people existed to serve her needs. She never could understand why that was wrong. I didn't want Sarah to grow up thinking that was normal, but apparently I failed. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that what they did was inexcusable. And you don't owe them anything. Not mercy, not money, not even forgiveness. They made their choices, and now they get to live with them. Thank you, I said, surprised by how much I needed to hear those words from someone who knew them. There's something else. Margaret doesn't have any money to give back to you, even if she wanted to. She spent most of the house money paying off debts I didn't even know she had. Credit cards, personal loans, some kind of tax lien from the IRS. There's maybe $20,000 left, and that's not going to last long with them living in motels. $20,000 out of $275,000. Margaret had blown through $250,000 in 2 weeks. What about Tyler and Sarah? What are they living on? Last I heard, Tyler was doing delivery driving and Sarah got a job at a call center. They're making maybe $3,000 a month between them, which doesn't go far when you're paying by the week at extended stay motels. $3,000 a month. Before they stole my house, Tyler had been making $45,000 a year. And they had been living rent-free in the small house I owned near Charleston that I let them occupy for practically nothing. Now they were making less than half that and paying premium rates for temporary housing. The kids are enrolled in whatever school district the motel happens to be in that week, David continued. Emma's been asking everyone when they get to go home. Jake started having nightmares. Those words hit me like a physical blow. Emma and Jake were innocent victims of their parents' greed and stupidity. But what was I supposed to do? Reward Tyler and Sarah's theft because it was hurting their children? I know what you're thinking, David said. That those kids don't deserve this. You're right. They don't. But their parents made choices that guaranteed this outcome. Sometimes there's no way to protect children from their parents' mistakes. After we hung up, I sat on a bench overlooking the Atlantic, watching the sun set over Portuguese waters, and thought about consequences. Real consequences, the kind that ripple out and affect innocent people. Tyler and Sarah had gambled that they could steal from me without getting caught. They had risked their children's stability on the assumption that I was too trusting or too weak to fight back. They had chosen immediate financial gain over long-term family relationships. Now Emma and Jake were paying the price for those choices, just as I had paid the price when Tyler decided my home was worth less than his financial problems. I pulled out my phone and looked at the contact information for the property management company I had hired to handle the beach house. I had been planning to rent it out to vacationers, to let strangers enjoy the place that had been stolen from me. But maybe there was another option. One that would give Tyler and Sarah a chance to rebuild without rewarding their theft. One that would protect Emma and Jake without enabling their parents' behavior. One that would satisfy my need for justice while honoring my love for my grandchildren. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for David Williams. 3 months later, I was fluent enough in Portuguese to argue with the grocery store clerk about the price of fish when my phone rang with a number I recognized but hadn't expected to see again. Mrs. Henderson, this is David Williams. I have a proposition for you. I was standing in my small Portuguese kitchen, preparing dinner while listening to the Atlantic waves through my open window. The sound was different here, softer somehow, more musical than the aggressive crash of South Carolina beaches. I'm listening. I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I have an idea that might benefit everyone involved. Over the past 3 months, David had become an unexpected ally. He called every few weeks with updates on Tyler and Sarah's situation. Not because I asked for them, but because he felt I deserved to know what was happening to my grandchildren. The news had not been good. Tyler and Sarah had cycled through 3 different extended stay motels, each one cheaper and more depressing than the last. Emma had been enrolled in 4 different schools. Jake had developed a stutter from the stress. Sarah had quit her call center job after 2 weeks, claiming the customers were abusive. Tyler was working 16-hour days driving for multiple delivery services, barely making enough to keep them housed and fed. What kind of proposition? I asked. I want to buy your beach house. I nearly dropped my phone. What? Not for me. For Emma and Jake. I want to put it in a trust for them, give them some stability while their parents get their act together. I sat down heavily on my small couch, looking out at the Portuguese coastline that had become my refuge. David, that house is worth $300,000 now. The rental market has driven the value up since I bought it back. I know. I have the money. From where? I've been saving for 20 years, ever since I left Margaret. I always thought someday I'd need to help Sarah, but I wanted to wait until she was mature enough to appreciate it instead of just spending it. Apparently, I waited too long for the maturity part, but the money's still there. I closed my eyes, feeling the familiar weight of an impossible decision. What exactly are you proposing? I buy the house from you at fair market value. The deed goes into a trust for Emma and Jake that they can't access until they're 25. Tyler and Sarah can live there, but only as caretakers. They pay utilities and maintenance but no rent. If they damage the property, miss payments, or get evicted for any reason, the trust sells the house and puts the money away for the kids' college. It was a clever solution, one that would give the children stability while preventing their parents from profiting from their theft. What's to stop Tyler and Sarah from just selling the house themselves once they're living in it? They can't. They won't own it. The trust will, and I'll be the trustee. They'll essentially be live-in caretakers for their own children's inheritance. I walked out onto my small balcony, phone pressed to my ear, watching Portuguese fishing boats return to harbor in the golden evening light. There's something else, David continued. Tyler came to see me last week. What did he want? To ask if I knew how to contact you. He wanted me to beg you to call him, to give him a chance to make things right. What did you tell him? I told him that making things right wasn't about talking his way out of consequences. It was about accepting them and learning from them. I waited, sensing there was more. He broke down, Nancy. Completely fell apart. Started crying like a child, saying he never meant for things to go this far, that he just wanted to solve their money problems and make everyone happy. And what did you say to that? I said that stealing from your mother doesn't make anyone happy except the thief. And sometimes not even them. The sun was setting over the Atlantic, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded me of the sunrises I used to watch from my beach house porch. Nancy, I know what they did to you is unforgivable. I know you have every right to let them live with the consequences forever. But those kids. I know, I said softly. I think about Emma and Jake every day. Tyler's learned something from this. Maybe not everything he needs to learn, but something. He's working harder than he ever has in his life. He stopped making excuses and started taking responsibility. It might not be enough, but it's a start. I thought about Tyler as a little boy, crying when he broke something, always looking for someone else to blame or fix his mistakes. Then I thought about him now, 39 years old, living in a motel, working 16-hour days to support his family after losing everything to his own greed and stupidity. Maybe David was right. Maybe Tyler was finally learning that actions have consequences, that other people aren't responsible for solving problems he created. If I agree to this, I said carefully, there have to be conditions. Name them. First, Tyler and Sarah have to acknowledge in writing exactly what they did. No euphemisms, no minimizing, no excuses. They stole my house by lying about a fake medical emergency. They plan to keep the proceeds from selling it. They betrayed my trust and love for their own financial gain. Done. Second, they pay me back every penny Margaret spent from the sale. Not all at once, I'm not cruel, but they make monthly payments until it's all returned. How much are we talking about? $255,000. Margaret kept $20,000 out of the $275,000 she got from selling my house. David whistled low. That's going to take them 20 years to pay back. Then they'll have 20 years to think about what theft costs. What else? Third, they get counseling. Real counseling, not just anger management or financial planning. Family therapy to figure out why they thought stealing from me was acceptable. Individual therapy to deal with whatever made them think they were entitled to other people's property. I can make that a condition of the trust. Fourth, I want regular updates on Emma and Jake. Pictures, report cards, school events. I may not be able to trust their parents anymore, but I still love my grandchildren. Of course. I took a deep breath, tasting the salt air of my new Portuguese home. And finally, Tyler and Sarah have to understand that this isn't forgiveness. This isn't me saying what they did was okay. This is me choosing to help innocent children despite their parents' crimes. They don't get to pretend we're one big happy family again. Understood? If I do this, David, if I sell you the house for the children, it has to be the end of it. No more calls asking for money. No more guilt trips about family obligations. No more manipulation. They get this one chance to rebuild their lives, and that's all. That seems fair. I looked around my small Portuguese apartment, at the life I had built from the ashes of their betrayal. It was a good life, peaceful and honest. I didn't need the money from selling the house. I had enough to live comfortably here for the rest of my days. All right, I said. Draw up the papers. 6 weeks later, I signed the deed transfer in the office of an American consulate in Lisbon. David wired $300,000 to my Portuguese bank account, money that I immediately put into a trust of my own, one that would pay for Emma and Jake's college educations, whether their parents deserved it or not. That evening, I got a call from Tyler. Mom. His voice was different, quieter, more mature than I remembered. David told me about the house. About what you're doing for the kids. I'm not doing it for you, Tyler. I know, and I want you to know that I understand that. I understand a lot of things now that I didn't before. I waited, letting him find his own words. I've been thinking about that day you signed the house over to Margaret. About how you looked when you were signing those papers. You didn't want to do it, but you did it anyway because you trusted us. Yes. And I've been thinking about how I felt when I realized you bought the house back. Not angry, not betrayed, proud. Proud of you for being smarter than we thought, for fighting back, for not just accepting what we did to you. Tyler. Mom, I need to say this. What we did to you was theft. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, theft. We stole your house by lying to you about someone needing help. We planned to keep the money from selling it. We betrayed your love and trust for our own benefit. The words were almost identical to what I had demanded he acknowledge. But hearing them in his voice unprompted, carried a weight that surprised me. I can't undo what I did, he continued. I can't give you back the months you spent thinking your son didn't love you enough to tell you the truth. I can't return the peace of mind we stole from you. But I want you to know that I understand what we cost you. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure Emma and Jake never think that kind of behavior is acceptable. I felt tears on my cheeks, the first I had shed since the day I discovered my house was for sale. I hope so, Tyler. I love you, Mom. I know I don't have the right to say that anymore, but I do. And I'm grateful, more grateful than I can ever express, that you found a way to save my children from my mistakes. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony as the Portuguese sun set over the Atlantic, thinking about consequences and redemption, about justice and mercy, about the difference between enabling someone's bad choices and protecting their children from those choices. I thought about Tyler, working 16 hours a day to support his family while slowly paying back the money Margaret had stolen from me. I thought about Sarah, who had taken a job at a grocery store and was attending court-ordered financial counseling. I thought about Margaret, who had declared bankruptcy and moved in with her sister in Ohio, her real estate license suspended pending investigation. Most of all, I thought about Emma and Jake, who would grow up in a stable home, attend good schools, and inherit property that would give them a foundation their parents had nearly destroyed. I had lost my son, at least the version of him I thought I knew. But I had saved my grandchildren, and I had found something I hadn't expected. Peace with my choices and confidence in my own strength. The Portuguese waves whispered against the shore below, a sound that no longer reminded me of what I had lost, but of what I had gained. A life built on my own terms, free from people who saw my love as something to exploit. Tyler would pay for his crimes, literally and figuratively, for the rest of his life. But Emma and Jake would have a chance to grow up understanding that love isn't about what you can get from people, but what you choose to give them freely. And I would spend my remaining years knowing that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be victimized, even by your own family. Especially by your own family.